The coronavirus crisis has brought serious distress to local economies and advertising along with them. The New York Amsterdam News has partnered with the local media association during this unprecedented crisis. Help us continue our important work of chronicling the life of blacks in New York and consider making a donation to the COVID-19 Local News Fund. Go to givebutter.com/Amsterdam News to donate. It's Thursday, April 2nd, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. We continue our coverage of the COVID-19 outbreak with my guest, Natasha Capers, of the NYC Coalition for Educational Justice. She's going to be speaking with me about how education is being impacted by COVID-19. As schools citywide are slated for closure for the remainder of the academic year, some parents are struggling with mandated remote learning, with many not even having the proper tools to help students. Now that remote learning by electronic means is the new normal for public schools, parents hope that their children won't be left behind. And we welcome you to the podcast for today, and we definitely appreciate having you on this episode. Still working from home and still making great podcasts and getting some great news out. The newspaper actually came out today, and we have some phenomenal stories that are in the paper. One in particular, our front page story that was written by our editor, Naaba Arinde. The headline reads, Kings County Hospital Nurse Speaks Out, and Naaba had the opportunity to speak to a nurse about the conditions at Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn, which is actually putting a very, very wide camera lens on what's going on at a lot of hospitals in this city. So please pick that up. And then also there's a story by me about a topic that a lot of people have been talking about on our website, and that's the issue of rent. It's the beginning of April, and rent is due for the first time since this COVID-19 outbreak has broken out. The first time that we've had rent over these last several weeks of being shelter in place, a lot of people getting laid off, and we did a really nice story about how people are dealing with it and what some of the options are and what some of the elected officials are doing. So by all means, pick up the paper on newsstands, but be careful. And you can also check out all these stories and news updates on amsterdamnews.com. Go ahead and check that out. Well, my guest today is Natasha Capers of the New York City Coalition for Educational Justice. She's on the phone with me to discuss how parents and students are dealing with remote learning. Welcome to the podcast, Natasha. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Well, we go way back. I know over the years you've done a lot for our public school students and our public school families in New York City. So it's just such a pleasure to have you here on the podcast. First and foremost, you work throughout the year in our public school systems with your organization. But we're in a very unprecedented time right now. I've never seen anything like this when it comes to education. What are some of the issues that you're seeing families are facing with this remote learning situation in our public schools?
Yeah. Thank you again for having me on and for your continued support of CEJ, the Coalition for Educational Justice. We super appreciate it. So yes, we are in unprecedented times, brand new territory. And so what we have seen is like an education system that, flaws and all, but that educates 1.2 million students, starting as young as 3 and who go all the way up in age to like 21. Go into a completely digital space in the span of a week, which is completely unheard of. If you had asked me before something like that could happen, I'd be like, no. But when you move at that speed and you do it without families, you do it without consulting community, and you do it without talking to students, what happens is that you put a lot of people behind. And so we did that, but we did it from a place of not truly centering those who may not be able to handle work remotely for a number of reasons. And so what we've seen is that there are tens of thousands of students who still do not have devices to do work on, whether that be a laptop or a computer, laptop some type of computer or a tablet, that there are thousands of students and families without access to reliable Wi-Fi or internet. A number of the internet have like stepped up and like given out quote unquote free services, but they, like, for example, Spectrum doesn't go into the Bronx, so all those students and who now have to find some type of way to get that service. But also we're denying families that may have had some outstanding bill, may have had some difficulty, and that it's not exactly free. It's a trial, right? And so we know what happens. We've all been there when we sign up for the free day trial and to get day 31, and it comes hitting on our accounts, right? We have all been there. And so that's what's happening with families. Also that we have a large number of students who English is not their first language. Their children are English language learners. They're multilingual families. So lots of things have not been properly translated. You know, there's a line that you can call to get assistance, to get technology, except it's only in English. I called it this morning. Like, it's one of the immediate prompts is not for language. The prompt is if you need technology if you need to take the survey to get technology, class 5. But if I don't speak English and I don't know right? Right. So we see that over again. Work is coming home for students not in families' home languages. That's helpful. How am I supposed to support and help my child in their work when the instructions are not in a language that I know, right? And that's also assuming like literacy rates in someone's language as well. And so there's these large gaps and divides. You know, we have thousands of students who receive some type of services, whether it's, you know, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. They have an IEP, an individualized educational plan, or they're in 75 setting, which is a setting that is unique for some of our students who cannot be in a traditional classroom setting. And now you have parents having to figure out, how am I supposed to like get services? How am I supposed to be able to support my child in ways? And so, and all of that cannot and should not be done remotely. And so we are really in a place where there are families who are supposed to get laptops or iPads who won't get it until perhaps the end of April.
Oh, wow. I just wanted to read, we did a story this week about this situation. We included your quotes from the information that you sent. And I just want to read a response from the DOE that we included in the story. And the response from the DOE was that we've taken into account students without devices, students with disabilities, and multilingual learners, and work with schools to ensure we're getting our students, staff, and families the resources they need. In addition to our website and school-based communications, the city's 311 line is fully language accessible and acts as a hotline for families, providing relevant information on remote learning, regional enrichment centers, and meal hubs, and when needed, can connect families to P311, the DOE's parent hotline. Now, is that hotline that you're talking about? Is that not still in English and not in Spanish, or do you know anything about that?
Hotline is not accessible. You know, they're not multilingual. And the fact of the matter is that this has been, because each school is doing it's, and I don't want to make it seem as if the system or schools or teachers are doing their absolute best. They are. We are literally in the middle of the ocean and all learn how to swim at the same time.
Okay.
Right? So this is not like a know better, as in like they should know how to handle a and shut down an entire system in a week. But we do know that there are underlying issues of equity.
Right.
Right? And so there's so many people, I've talked to reporters this week, and they're like, well, all these issues of equity, I keep telling folks, this is not a new issue of equity. This was always the issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This has always been the case. So you can call 311. Has anyone called 311? It is a cluster. And that 311 does everything. So they are, and this is not any 311 operator. They don't have the expertise, right? So why cannot the Department of Education not set up a hotline that has folks with expertise? There's an entire Department of Education called Fair and Community Engagement. There's a whole department. There's no reason why folks from that department cannot help the staff a service of that type.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's just there are many ways to skin a cat. Do not skin cats. It's not nice. You shouldn't do. But there are many ways to come to the problem, and they cannot continuously be, well, go to the website, well, people should call a completely different city agency to get information about the Department of Education.
Interesting. One of the things that you also want is you want to have a COVID-19 community task force. Talk a little bit about that. I know that that's something that you are suggesting. What would that task force look like? What would it do?
So in this moment, we're seeing that the Department of Education and City Hall are kind of working very insularly. Like they've kind of closed ranks, even with the unions, they've closed ranks, right? Because we are in triage, right? The way I've described it, like kind of two places that people are in. They're in triage, but we want to stop the bleeding, right? Mm-hmm. We want to stabilize the situation. And that is the absolute right thing for them to be doing. But many other of us, including parents and families, are already thinking about September because we're trying to figure out what are the repercussions of this. Because once again, communities and families and students, we tend to bear and feel the brunt, and teachers, of what the punitive punishment happens when things don't go well, right? So they'll say there's no state test this year, but they're not saying, well, what will happen because of that for in high school and middle school. Those are important issues. So if you're not using state test scores, which you shouldn't be using anyway because they're flawed, you can't use attendance because no one's in school.
No one's in school, right. No one's in school.
Right. What do you use? What are the new metrics? So now this is a very interesting place because now there's an opportunity to use the metrics for placing students in middle schools and high schools and other school settings that we probably should have been using to begin with all along. Right. But it shouldn't be done by themselves. It should include the voices of families, the voices of students. It should include the voices of educators and the policymakers, and that all of folks come together because each part of that stakeholder group holds a unique perspective and holds a unique experience of this current moment that needs to be around a table to help bring us out of that moment.
Okay. And another question rather, a lot of people are having is about promotions. You say in your information that you think that all students should move on to the next grade and all seniors should be allowed to graduate, including students who are overage and undercredited due to enormous inequalities and quality of access to schoolwork. What are you hearing about when it comes to promotions and graduation? What are you hearing?
So we understand this is a state issue, right? The promotion when we get to regions, which are tests, those become state issues. But the city should be voicing what to do. And it is, we've across the country, folks take a similar stance. So Philadelphia, for example, they're not waiting, like they're supporting schools, they're supporting students, in distance learning, but they're not using it against them, and every student is moving up. I think that because of the enormous inequities, either there's only really two options. Either everybody moves up or everyone stays in place. Those are the only two options. So what we're saying is that everyone should move up, right? Okay. Everyone, if you're a graduate, you should graduate. If you're a senior, you should move on. You should graduate. We should figure out how we get you into college or whatever it is that you're going to do after. Everyone should move on. That's not to say, and this is why, once again, this task force is so important, because we do know that when everyone does move on, there are going to be deep supports that are needed. And what is really sad is that this is the moment where our governor and legislators have chosen to the education budget. The time when we need the money probably the most in history, they're gutting it, right?
Right.
Because students, regardless of half their students are going to need immense support. They're going to need a ton of academic support. There's questions about summer school. There's questions about how do we help support students in this moment academically. But students, families, teachers, educators, administrators are going to need enormous emotional support. This is tragic. I know folks who have lost 4 and 5 close family members, friends in the last week. And we haven't even reached the peak. Right? So if our reeling from that, what are our children dealing with? When we see a child sees their parent have to leave the home every day to go to work as an essential worker, what does that do to a child?
Okay. One of the things,
mother leaves every day in an environment where people are getting sick and dying, what does that do to you?
I can't even imagine what that might be like. And I wanted to, since you're talking about parents, I did want to talk to you about how this is affecting parents, because a lot of, we're hearing a lot of news stories, we're seeing a lot of things, online and on social media about how not frustrating, but it's just difficult for some parents to, they're not trained teachers, and there are some parents who are in the home who are now having to, having to teach their children. And that's something that a lot of parents weren't prepared for. Tell us about what that experience is like for a lot of parents who are now having to become teacher and parent in the home.
I think that this experience is a little underrated.
Okay.
Because especially when you have multiple children across all the spans, limited access. So, there are lots of families, 1 laptop, 1 computer.
Oh, wow.
3, 4 kids. And everybody is supposed to start at the same time. Right? There's all these expectations of when students are supposed to start the day, how many hours they're supposed to be on for the day. And there's no academic support. Yes, you may be able to talk to your teacher for office hours for, let's say, 30 minutes. But if that is not an adequate type of foundation to be able to teach new content, to be able to teach. Listen, I speak the English language, which is the only language I speak. I cannot tell you why the letter E as many different ways as it sounds. I don't know. I don't remember. Now, I cannot teach that to my child. Luckily, they're not that young. But they're old enough where my son kept asking me, do you remember anything about trigonometry? I do not.
Yeah.
I just me that hand. And so, and we have, once again, not even taking it into account families whose home is not even English. So now I'm supposed to support my child in a language that I don't even speak.
Mm-hmm.
How? And there's not, so we don't have things in place like DialATeacher, which is an amazing resource.
Yes, absolutely. I've known, I had two family members of mine who were part of the founding of DialATeacher, and I know how amazing DialATeacher is. And I want you to talk about that. You're saying that DialATeacher is not happening right now? What's going on with that?
It's not happening. DialATeacher is like call center. And so everyone comes to this room and receive the calls in the same room. And so it's not set up for remote access. And we have to figure out how to do that. There is a very strong possibility that school does not go back into session this school year. There's very strong possibility students do not go back to school until September.
Yeah.
So this is a moment where we need all hands on deck, where we need all of the creative solutions around these problems. So yes, it's not set up to be remotely, but how do we set it up to be remote? Mm-hmm. It's also 2020. It should be remote.
Well, let me ask you. Yeah, let me ask you this: being that school probably won't be back in session until September, I have a feeling that later on down the line, things are just going to be not disastrous, but they're going to be a little difficult once school gets back up. Because let's be honest, everybody might not be up to speed where they should be because maybe homeschooling didn't work out or remote learning didn't work out. What do you see? What's your prediction for what's going to be ahead when students go back to school in September? Two.
We can put all our heads together. We can, all lock arms and find best practices and find solutions. CJ is a solution-based organization. Like, we try not to bring up an issue if we're willing to roll up our sleeves. And so I think there are many solutions for us to be able to have students come back to school and that will help support them. So some of those things are, what are the academic supports that we can figure out that students need when they come back? So is there a chance every student who wants to go to summer school should have the opportunity to go to summer school? Okay. That's one. Listen, not to me, me to go to summer school, I know. But any child who wants to be able to do that should be able to do that. Any child, any family. Okay. We have to have strong academic support when we go back into the classroom setting in the fall or whenever we go back. That means we have to be thinking about how do we partner with our community-based organizations to provide after-school services? How are we structuring the school? There's also all of this time is not structured in the same way as the school day is structured now, right? So how do we even rethink how we structure the school day to help the students back in? But I think one of the most important things that we have to do is we have to find ways to address the social and emotional needs of students and of teachers. Teachers, they're going through it, and so I fully understand that every frustration that I feel working from home with two children, all of the pulls, that teachers are feeling those as well in this moment, especially those who have children of their own.
I saw that there are a lot of teachers out there who are teaching students, remotely, but they're also they have children in their home that they have to look after. So yeah.
Right. And so they're trying to juggle the balls too. So we have to have strong emotional support for our entire school community. And the moment we're able to open schools, listen, we may say schools cannot go back into session into the fall, but that does not mean that we cannot utilize our school buildings before the fall. And I think it's really important, once again, to the task force of thinking about how do we utilize the school buildings in ways that can help support the community. So if that means opening it up and being able to have therapists and art therapy or just art supplies, opening it up and having community centers, being able to be in fellowship with one another again, I think those things are very, very, very important. And so we have to find ways to come back together as people, because I think other thing that gets lost so easily is that we go into like, I'm a parent, I'm a student, I'm a this. At its core, we are all people. And so how do we do this in a way that honors all of our humanity in a moment when we are so scared for humanity?
All right. Well,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Rethinking even just the purpose of what school is for, is because school is for the humanity, is to hopefully make some good people. And so if that's the case, then the minute we're able to open our school door, we should do that. And not just to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, but to just make sure that our beloved community is safe and well and okay. And if they're not, use that building to make them safe, well, and okay.
All right. Well, listen, Natasha, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it, and hopefully there'll be some solutions to a lot of these problems.
Yes, I believe they will, because, I'm optimistic today. It's Thursday.
All right. Well, listen, thank you again so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and have a blessed day.
That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening. The coronavirus crisis has brought serious distress to local economies and advertising along with them. The New York Amsterdam News has partnered with the local media association during this unprecedented crisis. Help us continue our important work of chronicling the life of blacks in New York and consider making a donation to the COVID-19 Local News Fund. Go to givebutter.com/Amsterdam News to donate.